Now this will build only when we commit to the main branch. All the other branches will be ignored. But we do want to run tests for one more specific branch, and that is the merge request branch. Which makes sense because once the developer is done with a feature branch and creates a merge request, we want to make sure that that merge request is in a state to be merged. So there are no breaking changes, the tests are not failing, and so on. And we can validate that by, again, running only the test stage of the pipeline. Now, in case you don't know what a merge request is, or what's also called pull request on other platforms like GitHub, for example, so they both mean the same thing, merge request or pull request. So when a developer is done implementing a feature in their feature branch, they will create a request to merge whatever was done in this feature branch, the code changes, into the main branch, instead of directly merging the feature branch into the main branch. So it's like an intermediate step to add the code changes that were done here into the main branch. Now, why do we need this intermediary stage? Why can't we just merge the feature branch into the main directly? Because when we create a merge request, that request can be reviewed by another developer, maybe a senior developer or someone with more experience, and they may identify some issues in the code or ways to optimize the code and write it better. So a merge request is a great way to collaborate and make sure that only quality code ends up in the main branch. And because of it, again, it makes sense to run the tests on this merge request branch before we merge it to the main. We can ignore the feature branches and do not run any pipeline for them because we can assume they're in progress, so the code is not really finalized. But once it's finalized and the developer creates a merge request, then we want to run tests on that merge request branch. And once it gets merged to the main, or once that request gets approved, then the whole pipeline will run for the main branch. And we're going to see all of that in action. First, let's go to our pipeline and add this logic where we say that not only for main branch we want to execute this pipeline, but also for merge request branch. So we can adjust or extend this condition to say if it's not the main branch and it's not the merge request branch, then do not execute the pipeline. Otherwise, execute it. And we have another environment variable that contains the information whether this is executing for a merge request or not. And that environment variable is called CI pipeline source. So this will define whether a merge request event triggered the pipeline. And in that case, the value of that variable would be merge request event. So now we're saying if the branch that we are currently building is not main and the pipeline trigger is not the merge request, then do not execute it, which means it will be either feature branch or bug fix branch or whatever. Anything else other than these two. In other cases, we want to execute the workflow. But we said for the merge request, we only want to execute the tests. So the build image, push image, and deploy image should still only be executed for the main branch. And that means here we can use the combination of these workflow rules and what we saw before, which is only condition with the branch name. So only for main. And there you go. So I'm going to commit those changes. This will again run the whole pipeline for the master branch because we just made that change in the master branch. And now I'm going to go to branches. Let's actually delete this one. And I'm going to create another feature branch. Let's call this, let's say we are working on a payment service. We create that branch. Let's say we make some changes in that feature branch. I'm just gonna add some text here, some changes, doesn't really matter. Commit the change However, we're in a feature branch, so no pipeline should be run for this. Let's actually validate that. And as you see, nothing was triggered. Now going back, let's say we're done with this feature, so we want to finally merge it back to the main branch. So I'm going to create a merge request. Let's say I'm a junior, so I cannot be confident that my code changes are valid. So I'm going to create a merge request that senior developers can review. So with this button, we're going to leave everything as is, not changing anything. This is a request to merge feature branch into the main branch. That's it. And as soon as I click on create merge request, the pipeline should be triggered because that's how we defined our pipeline logic. And we can see that here. So a lot of things are going on here on this UI view, but just note a couple of things. First of all, we are in a merge request view. So there's a separate section for the merge requests. And currently we just create the first merge request. So it has its own view with own buttons and all this stuff. We also see a button here for approval. So for example, you can configure that a senior developer can check the code commit and the changes and basically decide whether this should be approved or not. And you also see that a pipeline was triggered for this merge request. And either we can go directly there, or let's actually go to the pipelines list. And right here, the top pipeline, you see that it was triggered by a merge request. It has a label here, merge request, and only test stage was executed for the merge request pipeline. While for the main branch, all 3 stages were executed. And the feature branch that we created was completely ignored. So that's exactly what we configured.